React on enforcement and industry collaboration for stronger ROI. So throughout the presentation, we welcome you to submit your questions and queries in the chat, which we will then collect and address at the end of the session in a Q&A session. I'm very pleased to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers. So we have Xavi Umaneja, who's our Head of Market Segment Brand Protection at SIGPA, Vincent Mathieu, our Technical Sales Senior Manager at SIGPA, and Ronald Brom, who's the Managing Director of React, the Anti-Counterfeiting Network, speaker for today. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Xavi.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes? Okay. Here I am. So I'm just taking control of the slides. Perfect. So, yes. Hello, everybody. Just a few words about SIGPA for those that you are less familiar. SIGPA is a leading provider of secure authentication, identification, and supply chain solutions. It was created in 1927, so we are 2 years to celebrate the 100th anniversary. Headquartered in Lausanne, in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and we have been working with central banks to protect the banknotes. We also work with governments in different front lines. One of them is helping them to collect taxes. And with regards to brand protection, it's not at all a new activity. We have been working for more than 20 years on this sector, so we have a significant experience in that field. And as you can read here, in that sense, we believe that brands and consumers should have access to a safe and transparent trade environment. Few numbers present in many nations where we have operations and manufacturing activities. This makes a total of a little bit more than 3,000 employees globally. And as I said before, we are protecting annually 160 billion of banknotes in many countries. And when it comes to goods, products that we can touch, we are protecting over 100 billions. All this cannot only be explained with very large number of patents, 6,000 that you can see here. So that describes very well pretty much who is the company behind. Going to the topic of today, and making the link with patents. Clearly, we are in a very competitive market. All of us, we are working in our companies. We work very hard to differentiate from competition. And with that, we innovate. And one of the outcomes of innovations is to file patents. And this is to create a competitive advantage. Having said that, this is already a lot of work, but there are some guys, some bad actors that they do not respect at all that. And this is impacting us a lot on all of our activities, on those that we are producing goods that are bought by customers. One of main factors is what we used to say is direct sales loss. So products, people are buying fakes, and suddenly we see a drop or an impact on dropping the number of sales good. Having said that, it's in a scope, people that believing that they are buying a genuine, but they are getting a fake. It's out of scope. Those people that, if I give you an example, buying a luxury good, let's say an item, a bag that costs $1,000, and they get it for $50. So this, they know that they are already buying fake. So this is out of scope. But for the first part, It's very important, and this is linked, and this you can measure it. But the second, or what it comes from that, it's what we call brand erosion. So people that when holding a fake product in their hands, they have a terrible, a not good experience. They say, okay, I'm not going to buy anymore this product. I'm buying now another product from the competition. So all this a little bit more difficult to quantify the brand erosion. It can be very significant. And if I go a little bit deeper in that, when something wrong happens, and recently and unfortunately, like 2-3 weeks ago in Brazil, there was it came to the news that people were intoxicating. Some died, if not wrong. Some directly went to the hospital. Those that were more fortunate, because they were drinking a fake alcohol. So in that case, that is an extreme case, but it depends on the category of the products that we are talking about. It might happen that you as a brand, you find yourself in the middle of the ice storm, because police authorities are looking at, are making their investigations, are looking which are the brands that they were drinking, and you find potentially facing liability issues, and all the burden that it generates to defend yourself from something that you are not responsible. That it's also very important to when it comes and unfortunate. So all that at the end, we talk about not only protecting revenue, it's important, but also building trust. How many times we said, and we heard, sorry, that building trust is about years, but losing this trust is about seconds. So this is it's really important. I'm going to give bad information or bad news on that, but clearly our trend is that the number of bad practices are increasing and will continue to do so. In our daily work, we see perfectly these trends, meaning that we see new industries being attacked. So if maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was concentrated in a certain number of industries, now it's spreading across many others. So no industry is safe. And also we see an interesting pattern that goes across regions. Some regions that they were more, let me call it this way, at the forefront of taking action. Now we see that other regions are following because they have the problem in their home, and they have the willingness to act and the empowerment to act. So it is changing in that regard. This slide, I like it very much because it tells about this wheel, about if I'm working in a brand, what I need to do, what is my job to defend it, to protect my products. No, I start on the left, where it tells about I make an examination about my different products in my portfolio, which those are more in the target of counterfeiters. In general, not all of them are priority one. It can be classified. It depends on very different industries. It depends also on your quantity of your products in the pipeline. But you start there, then you decide to take action where you deem appropriate, implementing brand protection solutions. Then you communicate with the stakeholders. What I mean for that is that when you implement technologies that are oriented for consumers, you need to communicate to them so they are aware. When you decide to implement technologies that it's for specific inspectors in the company to do their investigations, you communicate only to them, and so on. Then it starts monitoring the products, not only at the point of sales. In some cases, we also see that that's monitoring across the supply chain. And when you detect infringement, you start working with the authorities for the enforcement. When we later on with Ronald, they will talk about React. He's more oriented on the enforcement. We Sigma, we focus on the implementation on the brand protection solutions. When it comes to financial impact and ROI metrics, the first thing that we always see is that all executive wants to know what is the impact of the implementation of a brand protection program. In our experience, in our cases, returns are not immediate, but there might be some cases that, depending on the area that we are talking, it could be. Also, there is no silver bullet. There is no right or wrong. Here, what we, let me put it this way, it's very difficult to measure it perfectly. There are good approaches, and here we share with you some approaches, but and it's important to start somewhere. But also, what it's important to highlight, and as I said before, there is no right or wrong because it needs to fit your specific cases. It can be sometimes multi-approach. Here, you might have we are presenting a market impact, financial impact, consumer trust, depending on the angle that you want to give it. If you want to give it a more operational axis, or the typical enforcement metrics, or even compliance or legal outcomes when we talk about how to manage crisis management. Why it's so different, or why it's always case to case, or it can be from multi angles, because it depends on the type of the articles that we are talking. You probably might take in, we have seen by experience that you take different angle if a product might harm your health or not. If the product could be a high-end, very expensive $1,000, that if a product, it could cost $10. So you might take different approaches. But also, it's very important to understand that you might take also different ways or approaches depending on the nature of the attack. Here, as you can see here in this slide, we talk about counterfeiting. We often use counterfeiting as a word that is like an umbrella word that everything is included. But in some cases, the product can be partially modified, meaning that the packaging could be genuine, but the content could be fake or partially fake. Cases that you buy a product but you return another one. Cases that the product could be genuine but it can be found in different or non-compliant distribution channels, or in cases that products, sometimes substandard, are non-declared, injected to the black market. So with all that introduction said, I hand over to Vincent, that he will explain and correlate all that with some use cases.
Yes, thank you, Xavi, for the presentation and the introduction. So I'll try to illustrate a few of these concepts with examples a bit more rooted in the practice of what we see and what we do with our customers and across markets. I'll start with a bit of a side example with the intent of illustrating the point that when you try to calculate or put a number next to the returns or the benefits that can be gained from having either a brand protection approach, or more specifically in our case, a product protection feature, a product authentication feature on the product, you have to think broad enough, and we'll come back to that, and Xavi has already alluded to the point. So if we take the example of what's now a known and expected to be growing trend in that sense, the second-hand market, so the capability for some products to have at least 2 and sometimes more lives and be used by different users. Of course, that can be enabled and facilitated significantly if the product can carry a proof of authenticity with it, because it then makes the resell easier. Of course, as the buyer of a second-hand item, you want to make sure it's original and it's going to continue to perform well in its life. As the seller as well, you want to be in this situation. So it has proven one of the indirect impacts of what we've done with our customers is to say, if you have a product authentication feature that is certainly good for brand protection, to fight counterfeiters, etc., you can also do other things with it. So that's one illustration of this. But really the point being to stress that think broad enough when you're trying to evaluate the return or something like this, and not be too restrictive. So that was a bit of an example, but now let's look at a more specific use case. So if I take and highlight the specificities of it. So if I take something like consumer electronics, interesting case where essentially those products are counterfeit. We know there are issues in the market in many geographies, in many types of product, and those tend to be facing consumers or end users. Then how do you go about evaluating the returns, or what we like to say the impact of brand protection or of product protection features? Of course, the obvious thing that you look at is revenue. So revenue recovery is how much sales you used to lose or you've lost, and now you could recover them because you have a product authentication feature, for example. So different ways to go about it. One way is to say, I just work with customs and I see how much, what was the value of the products that were seized. And that's one approach. I mean, if they were seized, they used to be in the market, they are not anymore. So now I can have this value back. Other companies will take a slightly broader perspective and to try to estimate the market share they lose to consumers, to counterfeiters, sorry. So of course, that's slightly more difficult, yet market share evaluation is something that can be tackled and that can be handled. So that's certainly one bucket of revenue that people look at, or that companies look at, and that is threatened by the fact that counterfeiters can try to sell their fake products to the end users. But that's not the only avenue down which you need to look at recovery and at return of brand protection. We also see quite a bit of abuse of counterfeiters not trying to sell their products to the end users, but trying to abuse the brands with it. What do we mean by this? You take a fake product and you ask for it to be reimbursed, serviced in some kind of ways, and you extract value as a counterfeiter, you extract money out of that. So of course, companies will also want to defend themselves against this kind of abuse. And if they do it successfully by implementing a product protection feature or a product authentication feature, that should be considered in the umbrella of the returns. And that's something that in some cases, and electronics can be one, luxury goods can be another one, where the biggest abuse, the biggest abuse with direct financial impact could be returns, and not necessarily always the sale of the products to the end users and the lost market share. So that's the first two avenues in which you look at calculating tangible benefits or financial benefits in a kind of not saying exactly saying it's easy is a bit tricky, yet we know exactly what we're talking about. But then in the spirit of looking at taking the broader perspective, of course, there will be situations and B2C products or consumer products, especially the ones positioned in a sector with some sort of brand premium and some sort of leadership around the brand, then you need to consider, as Xavi mentioned, what is the impact of having counterfeits of your product in the market on the trust of the consumers on your brand. And of course, if there is an impact, and usually there is an impact, but you could consider, depending on your positioning in the market, the strength of your brand, etc., you could even consider that any erosion of customer trust is going to be a bigger impact for you than a bit of revenue lost. Of course, these two things are correlated, but if you think about the value or the return that you can extract from a product authentication feature, considering how much consumer trust you defend is very important. And it's deemed by some of our customers to say, okay, I don't need to calculate revenue recovery by lost sales, because what I'm really trying to defend is this customer trust. Some of them are very mature and capable to calculate that, even put almost a dollar value next to it. For some others, it's more complicated, but it's definitely something you need to try and address, and certainly consider when you're trying to do the R of an ROI calculation. So that's the spin that we typically see on consumer products, and I wanted to take you through a different example. You'll get why. So if I take, it's a bit of an extreme going to pharma, But pharma is one of these, it's the extreme of this product category that Xavi was mentioning, where a counterfeit product can really hurt your personal health to a very bad extent. So in pharma, how do you go with ROI? Slightly differently. Of course, the revenue recovery still applies. I mean, you've lost sales, very clear, and you can put a number next to that. But also you can extract, and that's when you set up and you deploy your brand protection strategy, you can extract efficiencies. If you're able to verify your products faster, if you're able to go to the authorities in an easier way and be more efficient in the holistic fight that you're doing against counterfeiting, that's also something where you can calculate either a return at the level of brand protection, the brand protection approach, or of the product authentication technology. But being effective in what you do is also something that you want to look at. And another element that comes of significant importance in this kind of products is the concept of, you might label it different ways, but there's an element of, I want to insure myself against what could happen in a crisis. So by what do we mean by crisis? The crisis would typically be a patient got into an issue after taking a product that carries your name. If that issue is from a fake product that does indeed carry your name, but without the right to do it, this is something that you need to address and to manage quickly. Quickly, either because this story could go into the public, into the press, and there you want to be able to react and to show very quickly that you're doing something against counterfeiting, in addition to the fact that to saying that it was not your product. And the other element of managing quickly a crisis or an issue is around the litigation of this. So if you can stop a legal case from starting very early on, this has also value, and you could do that because you authenticate the product and you can tell from the very beginning that it was not yours. Then time to react has a value, as it always has in crisis management. And for that reason, you could be interested to have a product authentication feature. And then to conclude on that, these elements of almost insurance policies in case something bad happens is something that you want to consider in your return on investment of a security feature. So with that, I hope I've illustrated some of the points that Xavi mentioned, and I'll hand over to our guest speaker.
Up to you if your mic is on mute. Would you mute yourself?
Yeah, yes, it works now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had trouble in unlocking my camera and microphone. Sorry for the delay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, well, let me quickly can I control the slides myself? Oh yeah. Let me quickly introduce myself. I am Ronald Brom, Managing Director of React. And React stands for Réseau Européen Anti-Contrefaçon. We've been founded in 1991, April 1991, so quite some time ago. Since then, React has expanded, and we are now a global alliance against counterfeiting. We have 385 member companies, and the member companies are all the well-known brands you can imagine. from all kinds of sectors, from fashion. We very much started with fashion, but now we're into pharma and consumer health, in electronics and so forth. Wherever counterfeit products are appear, we have a sectoral presence. React is an operational organization. That means that we take action. We support our members in taking action against fakes. And that is at the borders. So we protect their rights at the borders. We have people on the ground to do market surveillance and online enforcement. That is very much the basics of React. Then we have a foundation, because we are a service organization, but we equally an interest group through our foundation, and we try to enhance the enforcement options available worldwide. That means in online, in customs, in civil enforcement. So we have landmark cases which we pursue ourselves, and we have a collective right to pursue matters as the React, and we organize training events and so forth.
Sorry, very quickly, Ronald.
Sorry, I need to put you louder.
The slides haven't changed, so I don't know if you can maybe take.
Have not changed. I am at 29.
29, okay. It seems that if you can take control, there's a button up on the left hand. Is it there?
Yeah, I did. Oh, I'm sorry. So I asked you if I had control, but I wasn't aware I had to do this move. Sorry for that. Can you see me? Can you see the page 29 now?
No, at the moment we still see yeah, we can see 29. It seems. Yeah, all good.
Yeah, with me it's a bit gray. It's a bit. Anyhow, as long as you can see the slide, then it's fine. Well, what is React? React has this 34 years of experience, as I said. It's a not-for-profit association. So the members, they contribute to React, and we share the cost, and we do that with an annual contribution and a contribution per case. So a sophisticated system, working well, making us being able to provide services and have autonomous powers to do the actions through the foundation or otherwise. Meanwhile, we are operating in 130 or more countries with our own offices. We have 18 offices all over the world, and with our partners. We have now 285 staff members. Well, this is so it has become a quite unique organization, and the global network is meant to assist the companies in moving cases quickly from country to country, from online to offline, and vice versa. And that works. That has proved to work. Our services, well, customs enforcement. So we have a service at React to. So if a rights owner wants to protect his brand at borders, well, we have a central team to allocate the rights anywhere in the world where there is a sort of border protection. We can assist them. That's included in our annual membership fee for a great extent. We have people on the ground to do market surveys, and our online enforcement is of the same principle. We have think global, act local. So also in online, we have teams in China, India, Philippines, Latin America, Europe, Turkey, to assist with all kinds of online enforcement action. We have an intelligence team to connect the dots and to disclose supply chains. Legal support. So we have a basic legal support. If you ask us, well, what can I do with my brands to take action in, let's say, Malaysia? We will offer first line support. When it comes to actual action, we use our local lawyers, and then we take adequate action, and is at the fee. So the first legal support is within this membership package. Second, concrete action is at cost basis. React, and let me show you where React is. This is where we have our offices. By now, quite a good coverage. I'm working now, by the way, on Africa. We are doing operations in Africa with our partners, but we want to have a feet on the ground ourselves, which is challenging, as you can imagine. But we are progressing, and in the course of 2026, I suppose we will be there. And now I will try to move. Yeah, that works. Okay, brand enforcement, because React is about brand enforcement. You can have a brand development, invest in brand development, you invest in brand marketing, you invest in brand protection, and that could be the registration of the right as well as using a security feature. But at the end of the day, if you're not enforcing, then all the previous investments are of lower value. So I do believe that all these 4 types of brand investment, development, marketing, protection, and enforcement are of equal importance. Of course, depending on the level of counterfeiting you may have, but it doesn't make sense to ignore one or the other. Enforcement is an add-on cost, and that is frustrating by times. There is no direct return. Yes, of course, you can ask for, in cases you can ask for, in litigation cases you can ask for compensation. You can also do that out of court, and we have a significant part of our income is, by the way, of litigation settlements, out of court and litigation compensations. However, if you would reflect the level of compensation with our total cost picture, yeah, then it's, what is it, 10%. And that is what I think you may expect. So overall, brand enforcement is a necessary investment for 90%, and sometimes you get some return. This means that you have to seek for the most efficient and effective method. And we do believe that, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be super costly. Yes, litigation is costly. Can you imagine litigation in a patent case in the US? But even in Asia or in Africa particularly, it can be really, really expensive. But it doesn't have to come to that. In most cases, online monitoring is essential. Customs monitoring and enforcement is providing a way to have a very repressive and preventive method of suspending goods at the border. However, it's the discretion of customs, so you don't have it under control. Industry collaboration is something we always advise. And we are all the time, at React, we are all the time trying to join forces in our pharma sector, in our consumer health, and in technical products, and electronics, and that works. And luckily, fortunately, companies are willing to work with their competitors to fight counterfeiting. The atmosphere of competition is not so present in anti-counterfeiting, and that's a good thing because then you can share cost. Online enforcement. Yes, well, we do believe that online enforcement is in fact not complicated. It's just a lot, and there is a lot to monitor, and there's a lot to do when you find infringement. It starts with so here you have to be careful and selective as well. You start with a scan. You start with a scan on where are disruptive products of my brand marketed, on which platforms, on which social media, on standalone websites, and then focus. Put a monitoring team in place and start sending out notice and takedown requests. This is what we do as well. React, by the way, has become a trusted flagger for such notice and takedowns, which is it's quite a unique phenomenon, and it's something introduced with the Digital Services Act. So it gives us a privileged position when we ask for a removal from a platform. There is a must to that online. There is a must to do this to know what is happening, and you will find that first of all online. That's for sure. Can I clean the process? Can I disclose the supply chain? Start online. That's where it's most feasible. And then work, collect the evidence, and work towards an offline solution. Customs enforcement. That's the other part I would like to emphasize. Yes, it can be frustrating because customs may not be familiar with your products. But first of all, before you start in assigning customs for customs recordal and monitoring, first identify the markets you want to protect and which are my main commercial markets. That's why I want the customs monitoring in place. Find the markets that infringe upon your rights and the rogue markets which you want to attack. Well, it's very clear in the anti-counterfeiting world that Turkey, China, and increasingly India are the main sources of counterfeiting. In all these three countries, the customs do not only monitor on imports, but also on exports. So that's where you need to follow your rights as well. Select then the jurisdictions that actually work. You can identify a market to protect, but if there's nothing being done in that market, yeah, then it's a useless investment as well. So you have to know where you can take enforcement remedies, and then you have to train the customs in those countries. And we organize training, but there are other organizations also organizing training events. And without a training event, the customs will not be aware. And you have to bear in mind the customs is usually going for the low-hanging fruit, the very obvious counterfeited products in fashion, in sports, and perhaps in watches. But anything else, you have to train the customs. So these are, yeah, well, I had 15 minutes allocated, so I think I stayed within time. If you have further questions, do not hesitate to contact me. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and I give the floor to the organizer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ronald. Appreciate the time taken to present that. So now, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you the panelists, insightful presentations. We're now opening the floor up to questions. We hope you've been submitting some throughout the presentation, and we'll be taking them and answering. Anything you have to ask any of our panelists, please don't hesitate to send in your questions now. See what comes up. Remember that to ask questions, you put them into the Q&A section. Okay, so we got our first question from, excuse my pronunciation of any names, I don't mean to butcher any names here. Zubar, so asking, can I get the detailed information concerning mobile-enabled authentication tools by SIGPA? Javi, pick that one. Also, that we can share these things. Also.
I think I'm happy to take it. I must be honest, I've not heard you very well. If you could just repeat exactly the question, I think I got only the last bit.
Okay, sorry. So the question is, can I get the detailed information concerning mobile-enabled authentication tools by SIGPA?
Yeah, certainly. So I would say probably full details is something that's better taken offline, but it is something that we look at when we look at brand protection feature. And I think the goal of this presentation altogether was to show a bit of the diversity of the possibilities and the actions. So of course, what we would want to do is that we do carry a portfolio. We have a portfolio. Typically, when you look at security features or product authentication features, sometimes you would want them visible for the general public to be able to verify. Sometimes you want them invisible. That's very relevant in a case where, as I was saying, the brands are being abused by the return of fake products. What you want to do is to consider who is going to check. I mean, it could be an enforcement body, a customs officer, it could be a consumer, it could be somebody from a professional from the brand, and put all that into the mix. And then what we do is try to select from our portfolio of technologies which one fits the best. Sometimes it can be a situation where it's smartphone authentication verification by the end user, for example, or by the inspector. We would carry different technologies for different people. Why do we do that? It's because the inspectors or the professionals could be told exactly which type of smartphone models to use. Some of them are very well performing when it comes to authentication. Some of them a bit less so. If it's the general public, the situation changes. What you want to say is, okay, the general public has the smartphones that they have, and we need to find a way to leverage these in the best possible way. So then the technology might be different. And then to the extreme of that logic, you could say, I want end users to verify, but they have no internet connectivity and no smartphones. And then you need to fall back on the good old overt features that you can check without any tool. So it's what I'm trying to illustrate is how we navigate our portfolio. Now, if you want to deep dive into one specific area, we're happy to do that, but I think it's best done offline. And I'm happy to get your contact after that and to reach out.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers the question. I have another one here. This one might be for Xavi. What advice would you give to companies starting their brand protection journey?
Okay. Just I hope that you can hear me well. So that's a good question. I think that it goes in line. It's the best starting question when it comes to implementing a brand protection programs. It goes a little bit into what I said before. You need to first select what is your main products that are at high risk. I suggest by experience, even if we would like to help to protect all the products, but always is start with those that are the most important to distinguish what is your problem. And that's I link also to the previous slide that we present. Some cases, people tell us, I have a lot of problems of counterfeits. But and when you start scratching and asking, because at the end what we do, and in line with Vincent was saying, it's very important to do this sort of consultation process because the technology is there. We are back up with plenty of technology, but it's picking the products those that are the most important for you to start protecting. The second is understanding what is my problem. It cannot be addressed the same way counterfeiting than adulteration. We see some cases that if you want to implement the technology in the packaging, but the packaging is reused, we have a problem. Or in the case of returns, if you implement the technology again, I cited the packaging, but when you return the product, nobody keeps the packaging. So, and then you need to implement the technology into the product itself. So it's very important to define very well, and this is something that we are very used to work with, to define the nature of the problem, because at the end it's the way that normally when we define a solution, it's in 3 dimensions. What is the problem to address? What is the way that you want to strategically address it? And let me give you an example. Sometimes you want your consumer to be involved in this process of authentication. So when one of your customers is holding a product in their hands, the most important is to ensure that it's a genuine one. So sometimes there are companies that they say, yes, I want them to be involved in that process. So for that, we might be choosing technologies that corresponds to this. But in other cases, in other industries, always case by case, there are industries that they say, and there is no wrong, no, I want to ensure that when my consumer buys a product in the shop, it's a genuine one. So I will do internal work to ensure to clean any fake within the supply chain. And for that, we will implement other type of technologies, often not visible to the public, to allow to do this job. And the last point, which is no less important and complements the problem, the strategy that is defined by the company, it's the operational implementation. I've seen many projects that even if we address the problem, we address the strategy, they fall because from an operational point of view, it means to completely change or adding or extra cost. So it needs to be as seamless integration as possible. That's why when we work developing and doing innovation, we ensure that these technologies can also be adapted in the natural way of products can be done. Sometimes we talk about labels, but sometimes we cannot apply a label. We need to go to the packaging. Sometimes we cannot go to the packaging. Sometimes we need to go directly to the product. So that's why it's all these 3 parameters. So long story short, it's always case by case, but considering these 3 areas that I was mentioning now.
Thank you very much. So here we have 2 questions from Mark. A bit on the longer side, so just wait a second whilst I read through them. So brand protection providers have many apps for authentication and track and trace, resulting in the end users with a folder full of apps that are only occasionally used. Is there a way around this to make it easy for users not to have a folder full of apps? Is the first question. And second question, does the panel have any advice on how to increase user engagement of using smartphone apps for authentication and track and trace? I would like to take this one. Awesome.
I can give some elements and then maybe my colleagues can complement. Yes, very good point. So we do see that sometimes regularly, that the idea that you can verify with a smartphone is appealing. Why? Because it's one way to get a strong assistance by the machine to decide. That's really a strong help to have a tool to help guide you in authenticating. Otherwise, you're on your own, which can be practical, but which can be a bit of a concern from some people. So having the smartphone is nice because it's a machine that helps you, and there's money out there in the market. So that's a way to get a lot of good controllers, which is the attraction of using smartphones for brand protection and product authentication. Now, there are different ways and different technology to get to product authentication. What we tend to find is that if you want to get stronger and better at authentication, it's usually easier if you have an application. Fair point. Not always, but usually. Which means that it could be the issue because the the landscape of solution providers is not consolidated necessarily to an extreme. It might be that if you want to verify different products, several products protected by different technologies, you might have to have this folder of app. It could be a bit of an issue. Around it, you could say either, no, everything needs to be verified with in a simple way with web pages, so no app dedicated, which is possible. It can tend to be, at least in our experience, a bit of a trade-off on the robustness of the security feature. So if you consider things like just check if the serial number on the product is valid and has data associated to it, it is better than nothing, but it is a scheme that can be attacked by counterfeiters in different ways. When you have, or when you enable a verification by an application, you can make the life of the counterfeiters even more difficult. Now, again, depending on your strategy, but you could also choose to go to the other extreme and say, I want to rely on a physical overt feature for authentication. So I'm going to ask the user to tell me what they see, and that doesn't need an app. And then I do the traceability, track and trace part by something that is not secured in the digital way by the smartphone, but just by interrogating information. So it could be a bit of a combination that we see sometimes. Get the user to a web page, give them track and trace information so they know what they're supposed to hold in their hands, and ask them to verify a security feature that is not connected, not to be verified with any tools, and just guide them a little bit and get to the outcome that you want, i.e., I verified that the product was genuine, I have given the product information, and I did not ask the users to install yet another app that, fair point, they will not be using so much. So that would be for the first part of the question. The second part of the question on engagement is tricky. Let's be very honest. We do see engagement when the brands are actively working on it, either communicating to their consumers, please check, it's important that you check, or by finding other tactics to get people to check. So gamification schemes, reward schemes to attract the users, or product activation schemes when you have a warranty, for example, attract the user into their ecosystem to scan the product. That can lead users to scan the product, but then it would not be for the purpose of authentication. So you have to catch an authentication feature as you go in that process. And that's been the two approaches we've seen. But if you just put something on the packaging and hope that the consumers will scan and download the app, you might be a bit disappointed by the ratios that you have.
Great, thank you very much. I don't know if Xavi, you have anything to add on to that, or has Vincent completed the question, the answer?
I can maybe give also to complement, and just because this is for me, it's like a debate. I think that it's clear. My 2 cents on that. There is no silver bullet. Sometimes there are by experience, two things that I would define not as a mistake but a dangerous. It's falling in love with technologies. All technologies are very cool, but they have their advantage and limitations. And what is important is to understand what it can do and what it cannot do, and what is the trade-off. And this applies to every single technology. And also, in the same line is sometimes technology are generating too much expectations, and then you test it and you are disappointed, and not is because it's not delivering good value, it's because maybe you were having so much high expectations that it's not meeting them. It's clear that we are in front of a world that is moving to digital. We are in the digitalization. The moment that we start implementing QR codes in the products and people using smartphones, it brings a lot of value. It opens the world to a new world. Brands know that a smartphone and a QR code in the product It's a way to communicate, and what was Vincent was referring to consumer engagement, but also it can be very interesting to better understand who is my customer persona, what is he thinking, what is he buying. In compensation, you try to make it loyal. It also brings value for logistics, amazing value for to monitor, better improve all the internal operations. It can bring also now more and more we see with all related to regulations and compliance to implement unique identifiers to each single product. And it also brings the layer of authentication. But again, it's a trade-off between I use something that it's very specific and very safe versus I use something that it needs very generic parts and it's a little bit less. At the same time, we see that the consumer engagement expectations were very high, and we see that the penetration is very low, probably because user experience is very important. Also, you might be using, you don't want to download 300 applications. You just want to go fast. I experience myself, and I would like to go fast, and I would like to not register, but then there is a lot of laws that you need to give your data. So it's a very interesting ecosystem. It will be difficult to increase consumer engagement. This is opinion, maybe I'm completely wrong, but it will increase for those customers that finally will say, okay, this is my brand, I'm loyal to this, I don't mind to go into this direction, but not for those customers that are not completely loyal.
Thank you very much. Right, considering we're coming to the end of our session, I would like to give a massive thank you to our panelists for their brilliant answers and their brilliant presentations. So well done. And then I would like to say a massive thank you to everyone who has joined in throughout this webinar and for the questions that you have asked as well. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact us at SIGPA, or if you have questions for Ronald as well, please go directly and contact him, as he did share the information earlier. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good afternoon, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.